Are you ready to work on sunshine blossoms? Let's get started. At this point, you've set up your embroidery hoop, you understand the basic principles and how-tos of punch needle embroidery, and familiarized yourself with this pattern. If you are not comfortable with any of these steps, come back to this video after you have watched our other video tutorials covering the basics. Since we are starting with a lighter color yarn, I suggest first threading your punch needle with the navy yarn to clean out any residue inside of the punch needle shaft. If threading a punch needle is new to you, take a minute to walk through our quick tutorial. Now, let's thread the punch needle with the light blue yarn. We are going to begin with the top narrow stitch to complete the centers of the navy peonies as well as the centers of the white anemones. Using the tip of the punch needle, punch the fabric at the center of the circle as far as your needle will go. Pull the tail of the yarn through to the back of the project. With the tip of the needle still touching the monk's cloth, draw the needle forward about 2 squares. Once again, punch the fabric. Now, before pulling it back up, rotate it to point in the direction of your next stitch. Draw the tip of the needle forward about 2 squares and punch again. Continue this sequence, punching short, tight stitches in a circle around the first stitch you created. Proceed with filling the peony center with stitches. Place each new stitch as closely as possible to the stitch from the previous round. When you are completing your last stitch, do not pull the needle back through the fabric. Flip the project over, pull the yarn through the punch needle shaft and cut the yarn with your scissors. Complete the center of the other peony as well as the 2 navy centers of the white anemones in the exact same way. Once all 4 flower pistils are finished, you are ready to move on to step 2. Now for step 2, punch a hole in the center of the pistil. Working from the center outward, create a star pattern using the satin stitch inside the pink petunias. Work each petal in long stitches up and back down to the center. The satin stitch is an elegant stitch that creates a smooth looking pattern. When working this stitch, return to the point of the last stitch as closely as you can so that each satin stitch is right next to the last stitch. Complete each petal, finishing back in the center where you started. Work the other pink petunia center in the exact same way. For step 3, we are going to use the chain stitch to complete each flower branch, both above and below the bow. Each stem is completed using 2 rows, 1 row up and 1 row back down to the starting point. Start at the bottom of a branch and complete a basic top stitch. The top stitch is the same as the top narrow stitch, but instead of punching every 2 holes in the monk's cloth, you are going to create longer stitches, punching about every 4 holes in the monk's cloth. Continue punching in the same direction until you reach the flower blossom. At this point, start the return pass back to the base of the stem. Aim to punch in the same hole that you created when working up the stem. Now I'm going to show you an alternative option for stitching the branches. The first pass up the branch is the same, but rather than aiming for the same hole on the return pass, punch in the middle of each stitch. This creates more of a braided look. Play with both options and see which one you like best for your project. Complete all branches above and below the bow using either the chain stitch or the alternate. Now we will move on to step 4, using the satin stitch to complete the petals for each flower bloom. This is the same stitch that we used in step 2, but the stitches will be much longer. Complete each flower petal, taking your time creating these really pretty blossoms. At the end of this step, all of your petunias, anemones, and peonies are completed. As we get ready to work the bow using the satin stitch, I found it helpful to take a Sharpie and mark the 3 sections of the bow that use the darker pink. I don't think it matters which order you work each section of the bow. I worked the watermelon sections first, followed by the coral sections. I like completing the coral center after the watermelon sections so that it has the most three-dimensional texture. Work each section of the ribbon using the satin stitch in shorter up and down rows. This is very similar to how we completed the coral centers of the pink petunias. The points at the end of each ribbon section can be a little tricky. Continue working up and down as far as you can, but sometimes you have to close the tip of the ribbon with a few stitches in the opposite direction, so as not to lose the detail of the ribbon. Complete each section of the bow in this same way. The final step of the pattern is to complete the background. For most patterns, including the other two in this kit, I start in the edge and work my way in. But this pattern has a lot of tight spaces, so I decided to work the sections in between the flowers first. I worked all of the sections in between flowers in the same direction, left and right. Then, when the section cleared the flower blossom, I cut the yarn. I worked the background between the branches below the bow in the exact same way. Once all the intersections were complete, I started working in rounds from the outside in. Complete the pattern in this manner using the basic top stitch. That's it, you've completed Sunshine Bouquet. I hope you enjoyed working through this pattern just as much as I enjoyed creating it for you.